But first of all, I'd like to start off by welcoming everybody. This is another one of our Informix Performance Tuning webcast. Art did one earlier this year, and I did one on encryption. And this time I'm taking a new look at a favorite subject of mine, the Sysmaster Database. I did the original talk for this, back in 96 or 97 at one of the first Informix conferences. And I've done it many times since then. This year I decided to throw away all my old slides, so I'm not going to repeat anything I've done before, and just focus on new things. And my first idea was to start off with 12 new things, new tables that I've started using in the Sysmaster database. And they're not really new tables. They're new maybe in version 12, but they're new in that I'm just starting to really use them. And then 12 new scripts. And I've actually got a few more tables and a few more scripts in 12, so we'll see how it goes. First of all, I'm Lester Knutsen. I've been working with Informix since 1983. First version I worked on was a 0.98 version, back when it was called Relational Database Systems. It's been an exciting journey to see where the product has gone and what I've been able to do with it. Most of my time right now is teaching and doing performance tune-ups. I like challenges where last week I was out at a university that had an Informix system running, and their registration was last week, and we cut the database response time down in a third from what it was. And this is what I like doing. Their challenge was they only had 32 CPUs, so they couldn't add more CPUs to that box. They had a huge influx of people registering during the week, and we had to get the time down. So that's a lot of what I do. I do a lot of training too, and we'll talk more about that later. And there seems to be a delay on my slides. There, okay. So this is the agenda. I'm going to talk about the Sysmaster database, and then I'm going to do a combination of demo and new tables. I'll go back and forth demoing and showing you some of these new tables I've been working with. And let's just see how this works. When I demo, I have 3 machines I'm on, and one you'll see is one of our training machines called Train 6. If you ever come to one of our classes here, every student gets their own server, and I'm using Train 6, one of our training servers. Another machine I'm running here is Thor, which is one of my development systems that has 1,017 active users running right now. And then I haven't told the rest of my staff this, but I'm going to be using one of our database monitoring systems to run some stuff. So I think you can see all 3 screens. Mike, if you can text me if you can't see anything or if there are any sound problems, I would appreciate it. And then the last thing I want to do is talk about SQL Trace. I did this briefly in one of our other talks, and there's a lot of interest in that, so I'd like to talk about it again. So just so you know, if you go out to our website, and let me actually open it up here so you can see what I mean. And go to Webcast Replays on the main page there. You'll see all these replays from our past webcast. Here's the one that Art did last week. And so if you scroll down, you'll find the Sysmaster one I did last time. And I'm telling you this so that I don't have to repeat anything in it. Here it is. Yep, April 30th. And you can do a replay of it. You can download the slides, and you can download the scripts. Now, I'm actually going to update these scripts, and so in a couple of days, you'll see something like this for this webcast, and you can download the slides, and you can download the updated scripts. And here's some short links to where the replays of the old ones are. So what I want to talk about is some of the new sort of questions that I always ask and I've found answers to in the Sysmaster's database. Everything from what is the hardware you're running on to what Informix features are being used, what's the SQL host file, how much memory is being used, what are the CPU usage, disk I/O and disk I/O history, checkpoint history, what's the table layout on disk, what tables need to be refragmented and that have extents. I've actually got a new script for that I'm really pleased with. It's much better than the old one I have. I've got a new script for tables, identifying tables that have sequential scans, a script for identifying where your logical logs are. I was just working on a site that spurred this on, and they had 50 logical logs, but they were spread out all over the place in all kinds of different DB spaces. And I had to figure out where they were so we could consolidate them and monitor the performance on it. And then also what threads are running, what's the most costly query, and SQL Trace. We'll take a look at that. So just to start off with, the Sysmaster, it's not a normal database. It's a peek into the shared memory structures of Informix. In the resident portion of Informix, you have a bunch of control structures. And the Sysmaster database basically points to those control structures. Now, over time, it has changed. It's actually become, there are more permanent tables there, and I'll talk about a few of them. But it's basically a peek into shared memory. It contains information about your server, about the DB spaces, about your tables, and about your users. And performance, first of all, it doesn't lock anything. It's like running OnStat. Now, some of the views, to make this database sort of user-friendly, Informix has created some views. And some of the views may require multiple temp tables. Like if you do any queries on syslocks and you have 1 million locks, that's going to build a temp table with 1 million records in it. The same thing, I've got a lot of sites that have very large databases in the one site with the 20,000 table range. And doing queries on the tables, systables, can sometimes be very slow because of that. And it's just because you're querying it has to build a temp table and to store all this information you're querying to present that data to you. Most of the time, though, it's just like OnStat. You're doing dirty reads on the database. Now, you can't update the Sysmaster database. If you could, you would probably corrupt the server. You can't do DB schema. You can't drop. It's not a regular database in that sense. It's a peek into memory. It is a dirty read, and it is just like OnStat, so you're not going to lock anything. The thing you have to be aware of, because it is a dirty read, is that you may get inconsistent results. A lot of queries on the Sysmaster database only return results one time because they're a snapshot of what's in memory. The next time you run that query, you might get something completely different. particularly if a user has logged off. You won't see their data anymore because they're not connected. So it's very dynamic. What you're reading will change as you're reading it. Now, a lot of the Sysmaster is undocumented, and I've tried to put an asterisk by everything. In fact, you should assume this whole presentation is undocumented. That's probably the best way to do it. And a lot of this will not work on earlier versions. I have tested all these scripts on 11.7 and 12, and except for one script that I'll point out, they all work on both 11.7 and 12. I haven't had a chance to go back and test everything on 11.5. I've pretty much upgraded all my servers here to 11.7 or 12. And the only time we put an old version on is when we have a client that we have to test something for. So I haven't had time to go back and test on the earlier versions. My older scripts worked all the way back to version 7. So, but the caveat is the database may change with versions. So let's dive in and take a look at what's new. Now, somebody said my voice is breaking up. I apologize for that. We had problems with that at the last talk, and I've got a brand new microphone here, and it's right in me. Mike, since I know you're on and monitoring this, if you can text me if I do break up too much, please. So the first new table that I was really excited to find is Sysmachineinfo. I do a lot of consulting where I go out to the site, and particularly when they're on a virtual machine, the DBAs don't really know what's on their machine. And this is a table that tells you what Informix thinks is on the machine. It has the OS name, the release name. This is undocumented. I've got an asterisk here. So it may change, but the OS version, the number of processors that are online and running, the page size, how much OS memory is available, how much OS memory is free, and a bunch of shared memory limits that the OS needs. And so let's just start off. We'll dive right in. I'll go to my training system. And let's see what this looks like. So on my training system, it says I'm running Linux. It gives me the release of the Linux, the name of the machine, the OS version, the type of machine. I've got 4 processors, all 4 are online. I've got a 6 gigs of memory here, and right now about 5 gigs are free. This machine is not doing very much. And it tells me some other things about it. Let's try Tor, which is one of my other machines that's very busy. Tor is a Mac, so I'm running 11.7 on it. Again, it tells us that it's Mac 11.4. It's an x86. I've got 24 processors. They're all online. I've got 34 gigs of RAM. So this is a quick way of going in and seeing what you have there. What I really like about it is when I'm working with virtual machines, I've been working with a lot of clients lately that end up having virtual machines. And with a virtual machine, you never really know how many CPUs you have. Well, this tells you what Informix thinks you really have and is very handy before you want to do something. And it will work, it's in version 12 and version 11.7. It is available in both versions to look at. And it's there ready to go. Gives you some great information about the machine you're running on. And it's one of the first things I use now when I go out to a site to figure out what is going on there. Here's another example from my training machine. The second new table is called Sysmachineinfo, and again, it's undocumented. It's got an asterisk. This is an interesting table because this stores 5 years, as this is my understanding, and I may be wrong here, 5 years of information by week. And it tells you how many CPU VPs you've been using, the max number each week, the max number of users, if you've got SDS users or SDS clones, how much disk space you've been using, how much memory you've been using, all these things that pertain to licensing. And this is one we've had a lot of people want to look at and see what Informix is using for licensing. There is a view called SysFeatures that is based on this table. So SysLicense is a license, a table with license information. SysFeatures is a view on that which decodes some of the flags and converts them into things like, is this a primary, is this a secondary server, is this an SDS server, is this an RSS server, and so on. Now I've gotten, and I'm going to my training machine again, and I'm just going to show you both queries. I only have, these machines get rebuilt all the time. So it says what version of Informix, the week, which is, this is the 12th week of the year. It's got 1 CPU. It's got 28 has been the max number of CPU VPs. And it goes back giving me a week-by-week snapshot of this machine until it runs out of data. Now, where this gets really interesting is when you take a look at the license history. And this is a script I have that shows me by week what the max number of CPU VPs I was using, the max number of user connections, and the max number of memory that I was using. Very helpful when you're looking at your licensing, because this is what Informix is keeping track of in terms of what you're using. Now, one interesting thing about this table, and I'm going to go to one of my other machines to show you this. If I go to license history, this is a machine I've had running for a long time. So it goes back to 2013, I'm sorry. And tells you how many CPU VPs I've used. And I've had points where I have had 1,000 users on this machine and how much memory I'm using on these machines. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. If you do an on-tape backup, like on your primary server, and take that to a development server and do an on-tape restore, and the server I'm going to show you here is a good example of that, you will see the history restored onto that server. So this is a machine. This is a brand new machine. It's only, we got it in December. So it should have nothing in 2004. But we did a on-tape restore of one of our other databases onto this machine. And so it brought with it the whole history of that other machine. So you've got to be careful with this data. If you do on-tape restores, the license information is going to come with that machine, that restore, and that's what you'll see instead of, we've only used this machine since December, and it shouldn't have any of that old data on there because this is a brand new machine. So that was an interesting discovery with sys features and sys license. Now, another new table that I really like is SQL host. And this is a way of, in the Sysmaster database, looking at what's in your SQL host file without having to go out and see what is in your SQL host file. And it has the basics. I'm going to switch back here, and if I do choose SQL host, if you only want to see the server name, the net type, the host name, and the service name, it has all the basics right there. I've got 3 rows in this SQL host file. On this machine, I probably have a few more than that there for different trading servers. So it's a nice little table to get your SQL host information in. Memory. This is actually one of my favorite new discoveries, and it's been there for a while. I just didn't really dig in and find out what it is. Sysseglst. This is a list of all the memory segments Informix is using. This can tell you how many virtual segments you are using right now, and it's kind of cool. And I have put together a script. This is my favorite script of this. It goes out and first does a query and summarizes by the type of segment. So I've got 1 message segment, 1 residence segment, 2 buffer segments, and 5 virtual segments. And it tells me how much memory they're totally using, and then it gives me the detail down here of each of these segments. Key thing I want to point out, and this is a good example. I have a case statement here. I guessed at this. I mean, there's no documentation telling me what this is, but I'm pretty sure it's right. The seg class 1 is the resident, seg class 2 is virtual, seg class 3 is message, and seg class 4 is buffer. So this gives you a way to see what memory is being used by Informix. You know, the record, I was at a site not too long ago doing a performance tune-up, and they had 80 some odd virtual segments out there. And the system had been running for about 1.5 years, and I was trying to help them to tune it. And all we did was, one of the main things we did was we took those 80 virtual segments and consolidated them into one big segment. And the system just runs so much easier then. So that's a key thing. This next, whoops, excuse me, I didn't mean to. Now that is my cursor bouncing, excuse me. SysVP list. This is another great table. And this has all kinds of detail about your on and its. Everything from the PID, how much time they're using, what class of on and it, whether they're a CPU, a socket, a IO on and it, and then a bunch of information about are they waiting, are they yielding, how busy they are. And there's some undocumented fields here that I don't know what they are at all, but I went ahead and put them in here. So it'll give you an idea of this total threads running on that on and it, I think is a really helpful time. Gives you an idea, and then the idle tells you, have you got more on and its than you really need? So let me get out of it. Whoops. And just show you what it looks. It's basically giving you a bunch of information about your on and its that you can then use to optimize your server performance. Another one I really like is SysIO history. And this is only in version 12. It's not in version 11. And this gives you the last hour of I/O by chunk. So you can see how much time and what your write times are by chunk. And let me just run this up. So it can give you an idea of whether your disk I/O is getting better or worse. Now, because it only holds the last hour, what I like to do is go out and capture this data and unload it and save it. And then I can go look at it over time and see how good my disk I/O is doing. Is it getting better or worse? You know, we put a new SAN in, and is the new SAN performing better or is it performing worse? So this tells you the chunk, and it tells you how many read and write operations and how many seconds. And these are really good when you see zeros right here. That means it's very fast. If you start seeing numbers there, then let me just see if I have any here on this system. This system doesn't have any. Well, here, they've got some here. So this is, the root DBS is a little bit slower on this system right here. Zeros are really good. That means it's too fast to measure. And let me show you on 11.7. This one does not work. It just says tables not found. So that's a 12 only feature. Syscheckpoint gives you the history of your checkpoints. And this is another one I really like because now you have a table that has, I think it's the last hour or so of your checkpoints. And you can see what your checkpoints were doing on that server. Much like onstat -g CKP, which shows you that, what your checkpoints are doing in onstat. Now, one thing that I've always tried to figure out is ways of finding out what your table layout on disk is. This goes out by DB space by chunk and shows you what tables are on that DB space and what chunks they're in. Again, a lot of these, what I will do is instead of running a select, I'll unload them to a file, and then you can open them up in Excel and see what they look like in Excel. And then you don't have to deal with Informix wrapping the screens. So as an example, if I come over here and take the chunk layout one, so it's telling you where my tables are on the data DBS screen. Now, this is another key one. I had a script in my old Sysmaster one on how to find out extents. This is a new one that I've started to use more and more. It's getting the data from Sysmachineinfo, which is an undocumented table, but it works really well in 11.7 and 12. And it helps you figure out what your extents are. And let's go out here and see if we have any extents here. So this is telling me I've got 17 extents here in the table benchmark in the zip database in DataDBS. If I go here to another system, and this one says in the table online order, I have 67 extents. My rule of thumb on extents is, you want to keep, what I think is ideal is no more than one extent per year. So if your database has been up 5 years, maybe having 5 extents is really good. From about 50 to 150, that's sort of a warning, but it's not really critical. Informix has gotten way better at handling extents than it used to be. But when you get over 150, and particularly when you get around 200 extents, you want to be careful, because that's the point where you need to think about reorganizing a table. And I had a script that's going to be in the package. I didn't have it out here ready to demo, that actually will generate the alter table statements automatically and new extent sizes for you. So if you want to have it go out and figure out what your extent sizes should be, it can generate the alter table statements for that. Using SQL to generate SQL is what I call it. Now, this is another new one. I had one previously on table scans. This goes out and calculates how many scans happened on a table. But what's really more important, because a small table that has maybe 2 pages should be scanned. In fact, you'd hope it would be scanned 100% of the time. And my old script used to highlight tables like that. This takes the number of data pages times the number of scans and tells you how many pages were actually scanned. And this is the more important number, the total number of pages scanned. And so let's take a look at this. Let's see. So this tells me I've got some scans here recently. Let's go over to another one here. And the AUS command table here has the most scans. But it gives you the idea of, based on data pages and number of scans, what you need to worry about. You really only need to worry about scans on big tables. And then where are the logical logs? I told you I had a client recently that I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out where their logical logs are. So this is another script that I've rewritten that goes out and looks at all your logical logs and tells you what DB space and what chunk they're in, and gives you a bit of information about the logical logs that are on your server. So here I've got logs in the root DB space, and then I've got logs in the log DB space. So I've got them in 2 different DB spaces here. It was real interesting. I was at a site that had them all over the place because they kept filling up the logs and they kept adding more logs to whatever DB space had the most free space. And we want to reorganize that and put all the logs in what I think is the best is to have 2 DB spaces, one for an alternate. So you have one log being written to in one DB space, and then when it's finished, it moves to the next DB space, and the backup takes place on the DB space that it was just written to. That was the best way to balance the load on your I/O. So is everybody on slide 34? I haven't heard any complaints lately, so changing the resolution must have fixed that problem. I'm sorry about that. Excellent. So another table, sysrstcb. This is your thread control block. This is everything you want to know about what threads are running. And really the best thing to do is just do select star from this table. It's a big table. Here's some of the fields in it. There would have been 5 screenfuls of fields if I was going to print them out. But here's some that I find the most interesting is what threads are running, what threads are waiting for locks, and if threads are waiting on buffers, and some idea of time spent waiting on locks and waiting on buffers. And this is one of the things to make your applications go faster is to reduce waiting on locks. I'm always surprised at how often people don't realize that. And so it takes optimizing the application to do that, and this is one way to help look at that and see what your threads are waiting on. This shows you all the threads running on the system, so you'll see a lot of the background threads too that Informix is running, much like onstat-g ATH. Now, sort of the last one I want to touch on here is Sqexplain. This is based on an undocumented, this is a view. The view is documented, but it's based on an undocumented table called sysdb block. And I've used it quite a bit because it gives you right now a snapshot of all the queries that are running and what the cost is of that query. As soon as a query is finished running, it doesn't show up in this table anymore. So it's very dynamic. What I like to do is capture this data once an hour, and that way I'll get a cross-selection of queries that are running. And then what I like to do is to, and this is just an example, except what I normally do is unload it to a file every hour, and then at the end of a day, load it into a temp table A. And if you summarize the total cost, so if a statement got executed 5 times and it cost 100, the total cost here is going to be 500, and the count is going to be 5 times. This will give you a good example of how what the most costly SQL is. And I'm going to then order this in descending order by the estimated cost to see which SQL statements are the most expensive. And what I like to do is I'll do the first 100 on this and go out and then just take a look. And those are the SQL that you want to start optimizing. Now this table is in 11. Somebody just said it's not in 11. Let me come here to one of my 11 systems. And I believe it is. Thor is on version 11. And yep. So it is on version 11. I'd be really curious. Somebody in the chat said that it's not in 11. I'd be really curious to if you could send me the release note. I mean the version number exactly of what you're running on of what that is. It says Sqexplain, not SQLexplain. Now, we've got a few minutes left, which is good, because I wanted to talk about SQL Trace. And this is the more detailed. The Sqexplain I like because you can run it without trying to turn on SQL Trace. So let me get something set up here for just a minute. And I'm starting a transaction manager that's going to, that we can use to capture SQL Trace. And I'm actually going to use version 11 for this demo here. Let me let my transaction manager start. That's one of the things I stopped earlier because I was afraid that might be slowing down the performance a bit. Okay, it's running. I'm up to about 90,000 transactions a minute. Okay, so we'll take a look at that in just a minute. So SQL is a new feature in version 11, and it allows you to collect SQL statements, statistics, resource usage, and performance. The default is it's turned off. Now, what the SQL Trace does is it creates a buffer in the virtual segment of memory. And that buffer captures all the SQL that's running. And it's a first in, last out buffer, so that the oldest SQL statement gets dropped out of that buffer. And so it always makes room for new SQL statements. That means that buffer is very dynamic. And that's one of the things I want to show you. I'm running a system with 1,000 users in a transaction manager, and I cannot capture every SQL statement that's going on. There's just too many SQL statements. I would fill up that buffer. So on a busy system, it can fill up that buffer in seconds. And the default amount of memory is a very small amount. If you make the bigger, it will take more memory away from your virtual segment. And that's the performance hit. There is a slight performance hit with SQL Trace. And so I'm reluctant to, when I go on site and they're in the middle of something that's very busy, I'm always reluctant to turn it on. We'll capture the SQLs that are running and see which ones are really slow, but there may be a slight performance hit on it. Now, you can configure the level, which is the amount of data to collect. Off means there's no collection. Low, which is the default, collects some basic information. Medium collects some additional information. The big thing medium gets you is the database name that low doesn't get you, in my opinion. And I like medium just because of that. And high collects all kinds of information, including host variable names. So here's an example of what you get with low, medium, and high. And as you can see, low, you don't get the database name. Medium, you do get it. In both low, medium, and high, you get the full SQL statement. But you get times. You get things like how long did this query take? Total time here. It tells you exactly how long it took. The average time, the max time. It tells you your estimated cost, the estimated number of rows. And I like this, the actual number of rows that were returned. So it gives you a good picture of what your query is doing. Now, the number of traces, The default is 1,000. You can change the size of that. You can change the size of data to collect, which is how much memory. You can change whether you want to do it for all users or for specific users. And there are settings in the onconfig file to do this. But don't use the onconfig file. I'm going to show you a better way in just a minute. It tells you the user who ran the statement, their session ID, the actual SQL statement, and the time it took to execute that SQL statement, and a couple of things like the database isolation level, number of buffers read, number of pages read, number of sorts, number of locks, number of indexes, all kinds of data about what was going on right then in that query. So it's really good information, and it stores that into 3 tables. SysSQL Trace is the main one. It has the information about a single SQL statement. SysSQL Trace Info basically has information about tracing overall. And then SysSQL Trace Iter has more detail for you. And in the slides, I have every field that's in there. What I want to do is jump ahead and show you this. You can look at the settings with onstat-g HIS. But the better way is to look at it in SQL. And you can turn it on with set SQL Trace Info with the sysadmin task and admin function. The only difference here is the task function returns a text message, and the admin function just returns a number telling you what happened. But you can do things like turn tracing off, on, get info about it, resume it, suspend it, and set the number of traces, the size, the level, and the mode. This is the way to do SQL tracing. You can trace only a database, so you can add a database to the list of databases to trace or remove a database. You can trace by session, by username, and that's really the way I like to do it. This is so much data that it's very hard to keep track of, and it's better to focus on one user. Now, the sad part is a lot of us have applications where the application has a user ID. And so if we trace that one user, we're going to get everybody because everybody logs in with that application ID. So let's take a look at SQL Trace. And let me figure out which machine I'm on here. Thor is the one I need to be on. Before I do this, let me just show you. So Thor right now is running a transaction monitor, and if I count how many SQL statements it's running, so there are 1,007 right now running. Yeah, it'll be about 1,007 because of this transaction monitor. Got a lot going, 1,000 active users. So let's take a look at SQL Trace on this. And what I want to do is go to the Sysadmin Database. And I just realized I may not forgot to set one thing. Yep, the Sysadmin Database is not on Thor. Bummer. I thought I had that there. I'm not going to be able to show you this. Let me just show you the scripts. So this here will go out and get info about it. I'm going to set up the sysadmin database. I'd have to restart Thor with the sysadmin turned on. I forgot to check that. This gets you info about SQL Trace. To turn it on for low, you just use the command sysadmin tasks set SQL Trace on, and I'm giving it 2,000K of buffers for 2,000 users, and it's on for all users. If I want to do it high, I can say SQL Trace on and give it the command high, and it will do it for all users high. And then I can run info and see what my status of SQL Trace is. And once you've got it running, you start getting data. Let me go back to this slide here like this. It'll show you detailed data about what's running. Good way. I really like this when you're in development, and if you have a development or a QA system, you can run this on to see what the cost of your SQL is that's running. Now, something I wanted to point out in 12, so the SQL trace data happens so quick you can miss it because one of the things I wanted to show you is when you run it, you'll actually see data goes through this, especially with 1,000 users, faster than we can capture it. But to capture it in the Sysadmin database is a task which you need to enable to save the SQL trace data. And all you have to do is run this, update it, and enable it. You can see what it does in Informix Sysadmin SQL capture. And that will go out and get your SQL trace data and save it for you in another database so you can look at it. That's the best way to do it because it's going to go through so fast. Now, a couple of recommendations. Use the sysadmin task function to turn it on and off. It's more flexible than using your on-config. Keep the number and size small so you don't affect performance. And you want to focus on a database or user and save the data for analysis. I can't say that enough. If you don't save it, it may be gone real quick. And so you want to unload it, save it, and then go back and look at it later and analyze it. Questions? Couple of questions on the presentation. Yes, the presentation and the replay of the webcast will be up on YouTube in about 3 or 4 days, definitely by the end of the week. And if you find the chat button, take a minute, and if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, and I'll see them. While I'm waiting for questions, yeah, if you have a question, just type it in this chat button, and then I'll try and answer it. While I'm waiting for questions, I just want to point out 2 things. Art and I do an advanced Informix performance tuning course. The next course is scheduled for July 20 to 23rd, and it's a great course. You get your own machine. You can come here, or you can take it online. In fact, pretty much all the courses I've done this year, everybody's been online. I don't like it because I'm talking to the walls in the training room. I like to see people's faces, but it works well that way. I've actually done a couple of private courses where companies have said, okay, we don't want to send people to your class, but we want to take a class, and I've had the whole class there online. Also, advanced data tools, we focus on Informix. That's pretty much all we do nowadays. We specialize in remote database performance tuning and monitoring. We do 24/7 monitoring for a number of clients. We do performance tuning, we do training, and we do consulting. So let me take a look at some of the questions that were coming through. What's the good question here? What's the difference between Sqexplain and Sysexplain? Okay, Sysexplain prints the how the query is going to be done in a lot more detail, usually to a file in your home directory. The table Sqexplain is what in memory, so the optimizer gets a query. It has to calculate the cost, whether you have Sysexplain turned on or not, because it's got to decide which way to implement that query. And so the Sqexplain table is a view into, here's a query the optimizer has and what it thinks that cost is going to be. It may not be the right cost, but it's what it thinks it's going to be at that point in time. And you don't have to type Sysexplain for it to show up in the Sqexplain table. Another question, the presentation is going to be on YouTube, yes, and the slides will be available separately, yes. They'll be on our website. So if you go to our website, by the end of this week, you should see a link to the presentation on YouTube and the slides separately. It's going to be much like I did this here with the last Sysmaster presentation. In fact, you can download the slides for my presentation. You can download the scripts, and you can go to YouTube and see the webcast. And that's the way we'll have it up here. A good question on, is it possible to filter SQL Trace? You can filter by user and by database. I wish there was a way of filtering by table, but right now that's not possible. You can only do it by user and by database. SysDB block, don't worry about that. Somebody says, I would look at Sqexplain. Look at the view. The nice thing about that is a documented view, and even if SysDB block is not there, the view is going to be there. And Informix has been really good at focusing on keeping the documented tables there in all releases. Oh, and Art just added a comment I missed. You can also filter on session ID. Thank you, Art. So we're out of time. Whoops, I didn't mean to close that. And I'm going to put this last slide up. Thank you guys for attending. Again, I apologize for the problems we had with WebEx. They always seem to creep in here, but appreciate you putting up with them. And I will have the slides and the scripts and the replay of this up on YouTube again in about 3 or 4 days. And look forward to seeing you in our next webcast. We haven't picked a time or date. It's probably going to be in May or June. And April, everybody should have on their calendars, and I hope everybody is going to the International Informix User Conference. Let me bring that up here. This is where everybody should be in April. This is going to be a great conference, a good place to meet your other DBAs and get some information about Informix. And so with that, I'll end this webcast. And if you have any more questions, please drop me an email. You've got my email address right here. You can go to my website and just put info there. And look forward to seeing everyone again on one of our future webcasts. Thank you.